So I'm running the meeting for Jordan today. Do I need to be made a host and able to unmute people that want to comment?
Just did it.
Yay! Thank you. I think it's 9, so I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. All my clocks say something different, so we'll go with one on the wall. I'll start out with roll call. I know Jordan is absent because I'm filling in for him, and Anderson is absent as well, and I believe Contos, and I believe all other. Let me check. We got Amber. They're not in any sort of order. um,
Jesse had said he was going to be absent too.
Oh, and we're missing Jesse as well.
And Heather also. Heather Harp.
And Stacy said she was going to be absent.
Yeah, and Heather Harp. So I think West is present, Jones is present, Cheryl's present, Von Lossberg is present, Merritt is present, Becerra is present, and Vasika is present. And then are we good on YouTube and eScribe?
It looks like you are, Heidi.
Maybe. Okay, perfect.
Yes, however, it looks like MCAT's not here again, so I don't know what's going on with that, but we're on YouTube.
I guess we'll move forward without MCAT, and maybe someone should check into that. We do have. Can you put up the screen for people to call in? And we do have minutes to approve. I've lost my agenda. Here it is. Okay. So we do have.
Heidi, this is
Yeah.
we shouldn't have minutes because they haven't gone through council yet.
Oh, okay. Never mind. No minutes to approve. It looks like it's empty anyway. Okay, so I'll skip that. If anyone wants to comment on non-agenda items, this is the time to do so. So you can raise your hand in the webinar. Let me see if we have no attendees though. Other options to comment is to comment on Engage Missoula or to leave us a council voicemail. That number is 406-552-6012. And since we have no members of the public attending, we'll just move on to our first item, which is the rezone at 601 West Broadway.
Yes. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Great. So I'm Caitlin McCafferty. I'm the planner on this project. WGM Group, representing the Wise Family Trust, requests a rezone of the property at 601 West Broadway, rezoning from Special District Riverfront Triangle, Subdistrict D, to Central Business District, CBD 4, with an outer core design excellence downtown overlay. Here's the location of the two parcels on West Broadway, right at the fork of West Front and West Broadway. Here's a closer aerial of the subject parcel. The property fronts West Broadway and Front Street, as well as the Clark Fork River. The applicable regional plan is the Our Missoula City Growth Policy 2035, which recommends the land use designation of urban center, shown here in red. This designation intends to address the concentration of downtown uses, including offices, retail, arts and entertainment, eating and drinking establishments, and residential uses. The property to the south of the subject parcel is designated as parks and open lands, which is shown in green on this map. This is the current zoning map. As you can see, this is the last parcel left in the Riverfront Triangle Special Zoning District. The properties adjacent to the east were rezoned from Riverfront Triangle Special District to CBD 4 Central Business District and OP1 Open Space in 2017. To the north and west of the parcel are properties that are zoned C1-4, which is neighborhood commercial, and to the south is the river and the riverfront. The 2019 master plan brings up another aspect of this project, which is the riverfront trail easement. This downtown master plan describes the Clark Fork River in Missoula as a defining feature and recommends an extension of the riverfront trail along the north bank of the Clark Fork River and open space along the river, which includes the southern frontage of this subject parcel, which is shown on this map in this like orangey brown color. This is the North Riverside Parks and Trails map. As you can see, this map also highlights potential mixed use trail along the riverside of the subject parcel in the dashed red. The applicant's submittal packet for the rezone includes a 15-foot wide public trail easement across the subject property, shown in this gray. It is shown running east to west, connecting to sidewalks on West Broadway at the western edge of the property. And this is what the slide is showing, just this easement is proposed. In regards to the Riverfront Trail, staff is recommending that the applicant and the City of Missoula enter into a development agreement to cover the dedication and width of the easement, as well as the construction and management of the trail. The proposed development agreement would address these following points. First is include a 20-foot wide public non-motorized access easement filed with the development agreement. It would include construction of the Riverfront Trail along the north shore of the Clark Fork River from east to west, without interruption or detour connecting to West Broadway on the west end. It state the developer's responsibility for the cost of a minimum 10-foot wide asphalt trail. Would state the city of Missoula's responsibility for the cost of upsizing the trail to a 14-foot wide concrete trail, as well as repair, maintenance, and replacement. The design of the riverfront trail and any variation from the standards, including easement width, surface width of the trail, lighting, provisions for trash and benches, shall be specific to the site and approved by City Parks and Rec. And finally, the development agreement shall be reviewed by City Parks, Missoula Redevelopment Agency, and Development Services, and approved by City Council. Now diving into the differences between the current zoning district and the proposed. So the current is the Riverfront Triangle Special Zoning District, and the proposed CBD Central Business District -4. So the Special Zoning District, Riverfront Triangle Special Zoning District, has design standards. It requires dedication and construction of the riverfront trail. It requires parking structures instead of parking lots. It has limitation on uses and restrictions on the location of those uses. The maximum height in this district is 30 feet with 50 feet of the river and a 52-foot maximum height along West Broadway. The zoning code also reverts to Title 19 for any non-specified standards and any new uses that aren't specified in Title 19. So even if they exist in Title 20, if they aren't in Title 19, they will not be allowed under this zoning district. In comparison, CBD4 provides for a wide variety of commercial uses that align with the growth policy land use recommendation. New permitted uses are added to Title 20 with the yearly maintenance updates. The maximum height in CBD4 is 125 feet with a step back of 10 feet above 85 feet at the street edge. The proposed zoning code would have a design excellence overlay attached to it, and that'll address the design standards that would be dropped off, that existed in the Riverfront Triangle Special Zoning District. In CBD4, there's no front, rear, or side yard setbacks unless a parcel abuts a residential district, and this parcel does not. The only setback in CBD4 for this parcel is a setback of 50 feet from the 100-year floodplain. This is a setback that can contain the Riverfront Trail in it. In comparison, the Riverfront Triangle Special Zoning District requires structures to be set back 50 feet from top of bank of the river. The Riverfront Triangle Special Zoning District requires off-street parking per Title 19 and requires parking structures, not parking lots. Off-street parking is not required in CBD4, and the design excellence overlay standards will regulate the design and location of any proposed parking lots or structures if developers decide to add parking if this new zoning code is passed. In general, CBD4 Central Business District with the outer core design excellence downtown overlay zoning code provides the following compared to the Riverfront Triangle Special Zoning District. So CBD4 provides a wider variety of commercial uses without the prescriptive requirements of the current zone. It provides a mix of permitted residential and non-residential uses, which is similar to Riverfront Triangle Special Zoning District. CBD4 has an increased height to 125 feet with a step back of 10 feet above 85 feet at the street edge, compared to a maximum building height of 52 feet in the current zoning. A 50-foot setback from the 100-year floodplain in CBD4 is in CBD4. However, there's no requirement to extend the Riverfront Trail with the setback area, whereas in the current zoning, a 50-foot setback from the top of the riverbank is required, and extension of the Riverfront Trail within the setback area is also required. And finally, there's no off-street parking in CBD4 compared to the current special zoning district, which has requirements for parking per Title 19. Here's a lot as it stands today, taken from West Broadway, looking from the east and the west, and then also a picture from across the Clark Fork River to get a picture of that riverbank. These are some very preliminary sketches of a possible development of the site. Please know that these images are preliminary. They're just meant to be illustrative of a potential use of the site. No plans have been submitted or approved. Next, I'm going to go into how the proposed change in zoning is in accordance with zoning amendment review criteria found both in state law and Title 20 as shown on this slide. First, the growth policy. The rezoning of the subject property to CBD4 complies with the urban center land use designation because the growth policy recommends CBD4 as a relatable zoning district for lands with this urban center land use designation. Also, the motion requiring dedication of a trail easement and development agreement are accommodating to the 2019 downtown master plan. Public services and transportation is next. The rezoning is in an area served by public water, sewer, sidewalks, public transit, and public roads. The motion requiring the dedication of an easement and development agreement for the extension of the Riverfront Trail enhances non-motorized facilities. Next is compatible urban growth. The rezone and easement will facilitate mixed-use development in the urban center. Next, promotes public health and safety. CBD4, the proposed zoning code, has a 50-foot setback for structures from the 100-year floodplain. And the motion requires dedication of an easement and development agreement to provide an extension of the Riverfront Trail. Next, district character and suitability of uses. The rezone and easement gives consideration to character by providing a mix of residential and commercial uses with densities recommended by the growth policy. And finally, there's no error or inconsistency in the zoning ordinance. This zoning amendment is a map amendment, not a text amendment. Therefore, there's no change to the Title 20 zoning ordinance with the map amendment to rezone the subject property. The rezoning is in the best interest of the city because it implements recommendations in the growth policy and the downtown master plan. All in all, staff recommends that council approve the adoption of an ordinance to rezone the property located at 601 West Broadway from Special District Riverfront Triangle Subdistrict D to CBD4, Central Business District, DED-D, Outer Core Design Excellence Overlay, subject to the applicant and the city executing a development agreement and public non-motorized access easement filed with the county clerk and recorder prior to the effective date of the ordinance, which is 120 days from city council approval. The development agreement and easement documents shall be reviewed by City Parks and Recreation, the Missoula Redevelopment Agency, Development Services, and approved by City Council. The development agreement shall include construction of the Riverfront Trail along the north shore of the Clark Fork River from east to west, connecting to West Broadway on the west end into the Riverfront Trail property adjacent to the east without interruption or detour. The developer's responsibility for the cost of a minimum 10-foot wide trail with 1-foot shoulders on either side of the path. The City of Missoula's responsibility for the cost of upsizing the trail to a 14-foot wide concrete trail. The City of Missoula's responsibility for repair, maintenance, and replacement of the trail once constructed, and a 20-foot wide public non-motorized access easement filed with the development agreement. The design of the Riverfront Trail and any variation from the standards, including easement width, surface width of the trail, lighting, provisions for trash receptacles and benches shall be specific to the site and approved by City Parks and Rec. And that is the end of my presentation.
Thank you. I know that Ellen is available for questions, as is Neil Miner from the Parks Department, and that we have some members of the development team present as well if they have anything to add. But I do want to remind folks that this is a pre-public hearing informational only item, and that we will be taking this up at the public hearing on September I believe it's 14th, next week. So I see Gwen has her hand up for a question.
Thank you. I am just trying to dredge up all of my memories of the Fox Triangle development agreement, and maybe someone can help me with this. My understanding with Fox Triangle, which I know that that's been hit the pause button's been hit for a while with the pandemic on that, but that Front Street from Broadway to Owen, I believe, was going to be vacated. And sorry, does that interact at all with, I don't think that necessarily interacts with the rezone proposal for 601 West Broadway, but how will that interact? Because this property is right adjacent to that, and in fact, part of Front Street. Ellen or someone, can you answer that?
This is Ellen Buchanan. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll take a shot at that. I may get Chris to jump on here, but I think this one is fairly straightforward. The issue with getting from the Riverfront Trail up to what will be a public access easement from Owen to Broadway in the what will be abandoned Front Street right-of-way is not and evidently cannot be made ADA accessible. The reason for the requirement that there be a trail that come up to Broadway on the west side of the subject property that you're looking at today is that it can be made ADA accessible because of the grades there. So that was kind of one of my first questions, is why don't we just take the trail up to where we're abandoning Front Street and take it on out to Broadway at that point? But there's a real sound reason for the decisions around having that trail come back up to Broadway between Taco John's, if you will, and 601 West Broadway.
Can I add something? This is Mary McCrae.
Yeah, go for it, Mary.
Okay, so the Front Street right-of-way in the Riverfront Triangle property was vacated for its entire length within that property, and an easement was put in place until such time as they are proposing a specific development, and then that easement could be relocated to align more comfortably with the development. This property has frontage on a very small portion of Front Street and West Broadway. And I know that in the Riverfront Triangle review of what the layout would be for the housing that was going to be on the west end of the Riverfront Triangle property, so just east of the subject property proposed for rezoning, proposed entrance to a parking garage at that end. And so they were using a portion of that Front Street right away. If these two projects were developing at the same time, could they work together to do something like that? Possibly. But this development, because it's really narrow in depth, the depth between West Broadway and the top of the North Bank is pretty narrow. They are not proposing underground parking. And so, I think Carl Posowitz with the development team worked on a design that it worked out that they didn't need to vacate the Front Street right away, that last little piece of it. That could certainly happen in the future, but at this point, they're able to fit their development within that, and they have access to their parking, which is essentially at grade, at the West Broadway grade. That aligns with McCormick Street across the way, which is a good location for it for this property. So there are a lot of different reasons about why they didn't end up requesting a vacation right away for Front Street. And it shouldn't be, it won't impact the Riverfront Triangle's opportunities for development on their property.
Follow up, Heidi.
Sure.
Thanks. And I think, having heard the answers, I would have rephrased my question to say, how does this project and this rezone interact with the Front Street right-of-way vacation? And thanks, Ellen and Mary, for kind of answering what I couldn't quite articulate as a question, but figuring it out. And then I guess just the other question I have is, so this rezone to this category does not have parking requirements per se. It is commercial zone, so there's no requirement for parking, and it's up to the developer whether or not they address that based on what they develop. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's central business district zoned, which doesn't require parking. Correct.
Thanks. Thank you.
And then Nick, I noticed you turned on your camera. Did you have anything to add?
Thanks, Heidi. Nick Kaufman, Carl Posowitz is here with me today, and Brian Salisbury is also on the line. So these LUP meetings work a little different from time to time. So we did the one for Heron's Landing. We did a slide presentation of the proposal. If you don't want to do that today, that's fine with us. But I would like to go back to, excuse me, Caitlin's slide number 9 and then her slide 19, because slide number 9 makes the developer responsible for an asphalt trail. And the city is responsible for a 10-foot wide asphalt trail, and the city is responsible for widening it to 14 and making it concrete. So if we look at slide 9, the third bullet, state the developer's responsibility for the cost of the minimum 10-foot wide asphalt trail. And then if we could go to 19. And so 19 says the developer's responsibility for the cost of a minimum 10-foot wide. Could we put the word asphalt between wide and trail? So it corresponds with slide number 9. And then I think we're good to go.
Yep, I can make that change before the council presentation on the 14th. Sound good?
The slide presentation does have some pretty nice renderings of what's proposed to the site. And it also shows the ground floor parking that we're going to provide. Heidi, it's up to you.
Sounds good. I see Mary has her hand up, and then Brian, and then we'll go to public comment on this item.
Mary, you're muted.
Sorry. I just wanted to clarify that Caitlin will update this presentation before Monday. This rezoning went to planning board and they voted unanimously to approve the rezone. They did make one change in the motion, and that was to remove the word concrete trail in the motion, because they wanted parks and the city to look at a variety of surfaces. Keeping in mind that, you know, it had to be easily maintained, have a long life, and just look at all the options. So that was a recommendation from planning board to remove the word concrete, and Nick's recommendation to clarify that the applicant's responsible for a 10-foot, the cost of a 10-foot asphalt trail. We can make those changes, but I wanted to make sure you knew of planning board's recommendation to remove the word concrete and just let parks and engineering have an opportunity to investigate whether there are other alternative paving surfaces that would meet all the goals and also be more environmentally sensitive, perhaps.
Thank you, Brian.
So Mary was addressing exactly what I was going to bring up, but I and you just said it, Mary, my apologies. So will we see on Monday a motion that strikes the material? Is that what you just said?
Yes, we'll strike the word concrete from the motion, and we'll add the word asphalt to the end of that motion, just because it's clearly what the developer was responsible for per the land use agreement in the Riverfront Triangle. So we're matching that, the 10-foot asphalt. The reason why Parks wants a 14-foot wide trail is to be in closer compliance with AASHTO standards for the safety of the trail and with the downtown master plan recommendations for the width of that riverfront trail. the reason they're looking at concrete is because once you get a building, it's a really tight site. And once you get a building in there and the trail, getting equipment back regularly to replace an asphalt trail, you know, would be difficult. So they're just looking ahead and trying to plan for how to maintain it and making sure, you know, it's going to be a safe trail and provide lighting and all the rest of it. So.
Great, thanks. And I was just going to say, Heidi, if Nick has anything else in his presentation, we could certainly, normally we give the applicant an opportunity to do that. I'm not sure if Nick, you were saying that there wasn't anything else, but I'll leave that to you and Heidi.
I think we actually only have another 15 minutes scheduled for this meeting and have another thing to take up. So if we have a presentation, maybe we could save it for the public hearing, and we can discuss between now and then. So with that, I'd like to move to public comment and see if there's any comments on this item. I am not seeing any hands raised on the attendees, but would like to give folks an opportunity. But since I don't see any, let's move on to the next item. And to be able to take that item up, we need to suspend our rules. So we'll have to have a motion for that. And just the background on that is that our last meeting on August 31st was a special meeting, which meant that we couldn't refer anything to committee, just because special meetings have different and unique rules. So if someone would like to make the motion, that would be great.
I've got my hand up, Heidi, if you're muted.
Yeah, go for it, Brian.
So I'm happy to make that motion. I was also going to clarify, I think we got a note from Marty saying that the meeting had been extended in time to like 11:30 or something like that if we need the time. So I don't think we're pressed.
Okay.
But
sounds good. I don't think I got that email.
I will I move that we suspend city council rules to allow for consideration and action on a resolution of intent to annex tract 9 of certificate of survey number 3176 located in the northeast quarter of the southwest quarter of section 12 township 13 north range 20 west, and to set the public hearing for October 5th. So to be clear, I'm just making a motion to suspend the rules so that we can take this up, and then we'll need another motion after we get the presentation. And for folks, it's 2/3 of those present and voting, and their motions to suspend the rules are non-debatable, but you do need to take public comment.
Sounds good. So I guess we'll see if anyone has comment on suspending the rules. I don't see anyone raising their hand, so let's move forward with a vote.
Stacy Anderson,
Is absent.
Mirta Becerra,
Yes.
John Contos is absent. Heather Harp is absent. Jordan Hess, absent. Gwen Jones,
Yes.
Julie Merritt,
Yes.
Jesse Ramos is absent. Amber Sherrill,
Yes.
Sandra Vaseka,
Yes.
Brian Van Lossberg,
Yes.
and Heidi West.
Yes.
That's unanimous.
All right. So let's move forward with the presentation then.
All right, good morning, counselors. This is Dave DeGran, Private Development Services. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so thanks for your time and attention this morning. We're here to discuss the annexation of Tract 9 of Certificate of Survey 3176 and applying a RT 5.4 zoning to that parcel. The subject property is 20 acres in size. It's located in the Mullen Master Plan area. You can see on the graphic, it is located adjacent to the north of the 44 Ranch subdivision. Surrounding this parcel to the west, it's airport-owned land used for agriculture. To the north, agricultural land, and to the east, agricultural land as well, though to the east, we are in the process of reviewing a subdivision application that would include or is intended for multifamily and mixed-use type development. So, as you know, this is a rapidly growing area. The parcel has historically been used for agriculture, but according to the applicant, it has been fallow for several years. It's adjacent to city limits on both the south and the west side. And the parcel is located within Annexation Area A. According to the City of Missoula Annexation Policy, Annexation Area A is an area where the annexation policy guidelines are largely met. So this is an area where the city has indicated annexation will be strongly considered. This is the Growth Policy Future Land Use Map, or a portion of it. You can see the property. It has a yellow designation. That's a designation indicating future land use of residential medium density with 3 to 11 dwelling units per acre. To the north and to the east, that's a mixed use designation. And to the west, that's a quasi-public type designation. That blue color indicates the Missoula International Airport. Currently, the property is zoned in the county as CRR1 rural residential. That's a not particularly dense rural residential zoning district. 1 dwelling unit per acre is the maximum density. And the proposed annexation includes a request for RT 5.4 residential. That's a residential zoning district that allows single dwelling and 2 unit dwellings. There are other moving parts in addition to the annexation and initial rezoning. There are, much like the Heron's Landing project, there's also a request to create a Remington Flats neighborhood character overlay district and add that to Title 20, the city's zoning regulations. Then to apply that neighborhood character overlay district to the Remington Flats property, this 20-acre property, to develop a phased subdivision, which I'll be describing here in just a few minutes, and then eventually, not before us here immediately, but sooner rather than later, the council would be seeing requests to plat independent phases. And I'm going to go into, just to give you some context, I'll go into some of these elements in brief now. So the Remington Flats Neighborhood Character Overlay District, essentially neighborhood character overlay district is a district that you apply on top of or add to the existing rules. As I mentioned, RT 5.4 is a residential district. A few other smaller scale commercial uses are allowed, things like daycares and such, but it's generally a residential district. And you can see on the graphic, Remington Flats property, 20 acres. Again, that's adjacent to the 44 Ranch, shown in the pink or the salmon color there to the south. So the real differences between the existing or the RT 5.4 rules that are on the books right now and what the applicant is requesting with this neighborhood character overlay district is smaller front and interior side setbacks, essentially to make it a more dense development than what RT 5.4 typically allows. And then also to allow up to 3 townhouse units to be attached. Right now, the maximum under the zoning is 2. So it's not a drastic change, but would allow a slightly more dense development pattern than is currently allowed under the RT 5.4 zoning. Here's a copy or a out of the preliminary plat. The subdivision is proposed to develop or create 152 residential lots of varying sizes, down to as small as about 1,600 square feet. You can see that there's a grid road pattern that's proposed that would connect to, it would be on the west side, it would be Chuckwagon Drive, which is planned to be a collector road to provide access to this and other properties, also to move traffic between Mullen and Broadway. And it would also connect to existing roads within the 44 Ranch subdivision, Tenderfoot Way in the central part, and then Riata along toward the eastern bound. And then the major east-west roads, Winchester Drive and Remington Drive, they're proposed to connect onto the east to future development as well. So it has a good connectivity. All the streets are proposed to be developed well to city standards for the most part. I'll talk about that here in just a second, but have curbs, gutters, sidewalks, in appropriate sized rights of way and things like that. This is a copy of the phasing map. The property is proposed to be developed in 7 phases over. The phasing plan at this point is about 24, 25 lots per year for the next 7 years or so is what the developer is anticipating right now. That of course depends on market, depends on other factors, but that's the general plan today. There's one peculiarity really that stands out in my mind about this property. And that is in the lower left-hand corner, the southwest corner of this project. You can see in red, that's Chuckwagon Drive. And Chuckwagon Drive along the 44 Ranch subdivision to the south, it actually stops about 1,000 feet short of this property. And so the developer is proposing to provide kind of a temporary type road or build a portion of the roadway and have 44 Ranch and other developers extended as well. So there will be contributions made by multiple developers to bring Chuckwagon Drive up to city standards to the property. And the other peculiarity with regard to Chuckwagon Drive is it's shown here on the western side is Roundup Drive, but it's the same thing along this property. So what you see here, this is a certificate of survey where the roadways for Roundup or Chuckwagon and then also George Elmer on the east were shown for the first time, I think, on a filed certificate of survey. And they established, you might recall from the Heron's Landing subdivision, 80-foot rights of way. So these are publicly dedicated right of way. However, here in this portion, you can see in the red circle, this is where this is the southwest corner of the subject property, of the Remington Flats property. Headed north from there along the subject property, there's only 40 feet of right of way instead of 80. The adjacent 40 feet of right of way is hoped to come from the airport authority at some point in the future. We've had some initial discussions with the airport authority. They haven't wanted to dedicate that right of way. I wasn't here working for the city when this certificate of survey was and the public dedication was made, when the COS was filed. I know that there have been discussions over the years with the airport authority about that additional 40-foot right of way, but it's hoped. The city administration, I think, has been working on it, talking with the airport authority, but it's not a done deal yet. And so what that means is that the right of way transitions from 80 feet south of the property to 40 feet on the property. And what that means is the developer is proposing half street improvement for Chuckwagon Drive, essentially 2 driving lanes. It would be fully functional to serve the subdivision traffic, but 2 driving lanes, curb and gutter, boulevard, and sidewalk. And then the expectation is when the additional 40 feet of right of way is acquired from the airport authority, that mechanism can be put in place to complete the road to collector standards. Other conditions of approval are the other streets built to city standards, of course. And then I guess there is one more kind of interesting piece that's happening in this whole Mullen area that this development and other developments in the area are, I guess, a party to. And that is, you've heard about traffic on Mullen and at the intersection of George Elmer right now and Mullen, and the traffic impact study for this project and other development projects that are coming in, they recognize that these developments and others that are forthcoming will have an impact on these intersections. And so the city is developing mechanisms to I guess, require developers to pay a proportionate share for their impacts on those intersections. And so you have on the annexation resolution and also the annexation referral, a discussion of mechanisms the city is trying to employ. We don't have the dollar figures quite worked out yet. I'm talking with Public Works Director Keene, city engineering. We're also going to have to work with the developers to try to come up with appropriate mechanisms. But in any event, what we're trying to do is we're trying to use a combination of city impact fees, grant funds for the build grant roads, and then also developer contributions and city contributions to help alleviate traffic congestion at these intersections. So it's kind of a work in progress, but we're moving forward on it. And of course, the city would connect, or the subdivision would connect to city water and sewer. Cash in lieu of parkland is proposed in this project, and your Parks and Rec department has supported that because there is a regional park in the 44 Ranch directly to the south. They're hoping that a cash donation from this subdivision would help to improve that park, provide facilities for the future residents of this subdivision as well as others. We are requesting that the subdividers petition into the Missoula Urban Transportation District, so tax revenue can be generated to someday provide transit out in this area. And then also that there's an navigation easement and airport influence area statement. These are pretty standard. But another point of note for you is the airport is not supportive of this project. They've actually come out in opposition to this project because they are hoping to someday expand or build a new runway to the west, I guess southwest of the current runway. And this project and several other projects that you're going to see are located under that potential future airport, runway. And so they've come out kind of in opposition. I haven't heard from them in a while, but back in, I think it was April, they stated that, and that'll be in the subdivision file that you'll see. So again, we're working through some issues with the airport. That runway is not really in the works, doesn't have any funding, but they're hoping it's someday to do it. So in any event, what we're requiring for mitigation or recommending for mitigation is that there be a navigation easement provided to the airport authority. It essentially provides some legal, I think, protection for future residents in this subdivision, basically alerting them that, hey, you're under a potential future airport runway. There's going to be noise, and you'll need to think about that when you design and build your house. So those are kind of the main issues, main conditions of approval, along with several other more standard ones. Now back to the annexation and initial zoning. So Montana law and also City of Missoula Title 20 has certain criteria for annexations and applying initial zoning. And so for the zoning, there are three main criteria, and it's an either or. The applicant only has to meet one of these. But the three criteria are that the zoning would authorize land uses comparable to the land uses authorized under the current county zoning classification. And I would argue that that is the case here. You know, currently the county zoning allows single dwelling type residential development. This zoning would allow single dwelling residential development as well as 2 and 3 family residential development. But I would call it pretty comparable. The second criterion is that the zoning would authorize land uses that are consistent with the land uses approved by the county commissioners or board of adjustment. Again, I think that criterion is met. You know, we're going from county residential to city residential. It's really not too much different, just at a higher density. And then third, that the new zoning be consistent with the land use and zoning recommendations as set forth in the growth policy. And as I showed on that map earlier, the growth policy map, this zoning would be consistent with the growth policy map because it would allow residential land use at an urban scale. Again, the growth policy map mentions 3 to 11 dwelling units per acre. The density proposed in this development is actually 7.6, so it falls right kind of squarely in the middle of that designation. So it complies with the growth policy is what I'm trying to say. You've already hit this recommended motion. It was to suspend the rules. And then finally, the recommended motion is to adopt a resolution of intention to annex and incorporate within the boundaries of the city of Missoula, tract 9 of certificate of survey 3176, and zone the property RT 5.4 residential, and to set a public hearing for October 5th, 2020. And that concludes my presentation.
All right, thank you. Do we have any questions about this project from council or any other, discussion? Gwen?
I feel like I'm the only one asking questions today.
There's
but,
more people.
Oh, good, good, good. I just wanted to explore this concept of the airport runway. It sounds like this would be in the line of flight. So possibly if a runway is eventually built by the airport, this subdivision would be underneath where planes are coming in and going out of for landing. This is the first time on council that I've really heard this concept come up as being an issue. And I think it's because we're starting to grow out into that direction towards the airport. First of all, are there other developments that we have where there is an navigation easement here in Missoula? And then second of all, how do other communities deal with this? I mean, I'm just trying to flash back in my mind when I've been on an airplane. It does seem like you're flying over neighborhoods a lot of times in other cities as you're coming into land. How do other communities deal with this? And what are the, besides noise, is there pollution as an issue? And how does it work in these other communities?
Well, a little bit of context. You know, I'll have to go back and look at the airport's plans. Again, I think what they're hoping to do is just kind of preserve some area for, you know, for a potential future runway, depending on growth and things like that. I think they're just thinking ahead, which is great. You can see kind of the existing airport configuration. Again, this is from the growth policy. And we do have, you asked about other properties and the projects in the city of Missoula where a navigation easement is in effect. Yes, I know of two. The RMB subdivision, which is at the intersection of Broadway, or future intersection of Broadway and Mary Jane Boulevard, and right up in this area. That has a navigation easement. That was a requirement of annexation. And that's a very recent development. That's just within the past 6 months that was approved by council. And then there's also one for a phase in the 44 Ranch subdivision that I came across yesterday. So I know it's been done before here in Missoula. You know, it's an interesting bit of a conundrum, I think, because this is the growth policy map that was adopted back in 2015. It's something, I don't know how much the airport authority participated in that process, that, you know, the whole kind of public outreach. I know agencies were contacted, things like that. But you know, you would have thought that it would have been an issue back then, because what's recommended on this map, of course, is, you know, urban residential development in yellow, mixed use, much higher density development. You know, could be multifamily, could be this kind of semicircle right here kind of represents a town center, or a central area where it's supposed to be more intensive. And so this is kind of right in the same general picture. And the airport authority has done a good job. Obviously, they've purchased in blue, this is airport property. So they've set aside land for kind of future plans for a buffer and things like that. You know, I haven't studied in detail what other communities have done, but I'm sure it's buffering. I know that airports don't like to have a lot of wildlife in the immediate vicinity, particularly birds, because that can present a hazard. You know, I know that navigation easements are utilized in communities. And I also think that in some cases, depending on the potential noise and flight patterns, that certain building codes might be employed to lessen, you know, for structural stability, also for lessening of kind of rattling of windows and noise impacts and things like that. But I haven't studied the issue in detail, so don't have a great answer. But just one last point on this is, we don't know that a runway is going to be constructed at any point in the future. It may not. And so I think the city is in a position, at least in my opinion, that you know, the airport hasn't tried to acquire easements, hasn't tried to acquire additional land under the property, at least to my knowledge, or under the potential flight pattern. You have a development application, or actually several that are coming in right now. This is an area where the city is planned for development. So I think it would be hard to deny development based on what potentially might happen at some point in the future. I think that, in my opinion, we should try to mitigate the potential impacts the best we can. But I think that's the extent of, in my opinion, of what the city can and should do at this time.
Follow up, Heidi?
What did you say? I was going to see if Mary wanted to add something to this answer, because I saw her hand went up, and then I also wanted to give an opportunity if there's someone speaking on behalf of the developer to provide additional info on the project in general, and then I'll go back to council questions.
I think Dave covered it pretty well. I just wanted to let council know that this came up with 44 Ranch subdivision in 2006. And with information from the attorney's office, Dave is correct that the idea that council could limit or deny development opportunities that are already recommended in their growth policies and in prior zoning for residential development would be, would be really difficult to do and stand up in court. So if there was a immediate plan, and Dave's right, if they had been purchasing land or purchasing easements, otherwise it's sort of taking development rights that they already have for something that may possibly happen in the future. So the mitigations we have done for 44 Ranch subdivision and every subdivision since then that's in the path is to require a abrogation easement and to have that language. So when people purchase lots, they know that the language is in their title report, in their packet, in their development covenants. So they're fully aware of any restrictions for height, for antennas, for any, that there will be noise, that they are in a flight path, that there is some potential for airplane crashes in this area. So at least before they're purchasing a home, they're fully aware of what they're buying in that location.
Thank you. Is there someone that wants to comment on behalf of the developer?
Why don't you just tell me about it? Okay.
No? All right, then we'll, Gwen, did you have another question?
I did, thanks. And those answers were really helpful. I guess in my mind, the issue that I'm getting at is at some point, there's got to be a line drawn where houses can't be too close to the airport, but it really helps to have you point out that looking at this map that you have up here, that the Missoula Airport owns the property in the kind of the blue-gray color. And to me, that's probably the line where if they own it and they're not going to sell it or have it be developed eventually, but they're holding that as a buffer for future airport development, then that helps me in my mind figure out how, because the airport's going to continue to grow. We need more development in Missoula. At some point, those two are going to rub up against each other. And it sounds like the property owned by the airport is the buffer they're creating there. And then with the abrogation easement, it's putting people on notice that they're going to be impacted by living this close to the airport with potential future development and expansion of the airport. So thank you for that information. Very helpful.
All right, I've got Amber next, and then Mirta, and then Brian.
Thank you. So is this area part of the Mullen area master planning, or are we just outside of it?
It is within the Mullen area master plan area.
Okay, thank you. And then I have that's what I thought. I just wanted to confirm that. And also, will you go back to the slide around the half street improvements? I don't completely understand that. I would love a little more. I would love to understand that a little more. And then my question, I guess, or what I'm getting at around being part of the Mullen area master plan, and my question as it relates to this, I guess, is how does that work with kind of through streets? And I'm just worried about them all kind of coming together, since this is happening at a time that we're also trying to get that plan done. And I don't even know what a half street, I don't understand the half street thing.
All right, what I'd like to do is, I guess, show you exactly what's being proposed by the developer with regard to the on-site section. But it's going to take me just a minute to pull it up. I don't have it pulled up right now, but I can get it.
Mir, did you have a question you want to ask while Dave's getting that information?
Sure. I have a couple of questions. One of them has to do with cash in lieu of parkland dedication. If we still have someone from Parks, I would really like to hear more about the rationale for that. I know that there were significant improvements to the 44 Ranch playground. That took a lot of coordination between the residents, a lot of fundraising, also working with Parks. And so I know that while the cash in lieu of parkland dedication will serve to further improve that playground in 44 Ranch, that there's a real need for more parks and playground equipment in that area, especially as it grows. So just wondering why it's not being dedicated as part of this development. And then I also have questions about the total density for the proposed development. Just wanted to know, I think Dave mentioned that it's 152 residential lots that are being proposed. I forget exactly how big the property is, but what would that amount to in terms of dwelling units per acre? Just to have a comparison with what is under the current zoning in the county, which is pretty low. It's 1 to, I think it's 3 to 11 dwelling units per acre. So even if we went to 11 dwelling units per acre, what is the density compared to what's being proposed? I think that's a lot of my constituents like to have those numbers just because it translates into people and cars and overall additional everything for that area. Just anecdotally, I think the airport issue is one that we have lived with for a long time. I remember when the Waimalan area plan was being developed, the airport influence zone was significantly bigger. And I think that that changes according to technology changes. In the past, I think airplanes needed significantly more land for landing or taking off. And as we make progress in technology, the required amount of land needed for a landing path changes. I think technology also changes the how high the decibel, the noise that's being produced by planes changes. I'm looking up Brian, probably looking at me thinking, what is she talking about? But anyways, I think that technology is an aspect of how much land and what the airport influence zone is and how it's changed through the years. But I'm curious to know how we as a city see that in terms of public health and safety, because that is one of the criteria for rezoning and annexation. So just wondering at what point do we think we need to know more from the airport in order to annex and or rezone property in these areas? Those are a lot of questions, sorry.
Let me start with the parks related question. And so there have been, early on in the development process, the applicant comes in and we have what's called an intake process. And the applicant puts some ideas down on paper. We as a staff go through it and look for potential issues, compatibility, whether it's compliance with growth policy, what zoning might be appropriate. We have in-house type staff meetings to go over the development review type meetings. And so lots of different departments weigh in, including Parks and Rec, engineering, and stormwater, and others. And so I wasn't there for early discussions. Mary, please, if I don't have a complete answer, please feel free to jump in. But what I saw from the correspondence, and it's from Neil Miner, who I don't think is with us still, but he indicated that, and there's a letter, I don't have it up in front of me, but he indicated that the 44 Ranch Park immediately to the south of this project, it's within easily a quarter mile of this project, would serve as a regional park for this development, for the residents. And that, as you may know, under the Montana State Subdivision Law, there's a requirement for parkland dedication. It depends, the amount of parkland or the percentage of parkland is dependent on the lot sizes that are proposed. In this case, with the lot sizes being less than half an acre, 11% of the area that's in lots, so not streets, but in lots, has to be dedicated. And that means, in this case, it's 1.43 acres is, I believe, what the subdivider is required to dedicate in this particular project. So that dedication can come in a couple of different ways. It can be land, or a few different ways. It can be land, so actual parkland itself that's dedicated to the public. It can be cash instead of land that's assessed at the fair market value, or it can be a combination of cash and land. So in this case, Parks and Rec requested cash instead of land. I don't know, I think it's because they felt the 44 ranch subdivision would serve this project, and I can certainly find that documentation. I don't have it at my fingertips right now, but that was the recommendation from Parks and Rec. And Mary, did I miss anything?
Just want to add that it was Parks' preference that it be cash in lieu. Neil Miner had mentioned early on that the 44 Ranch Park was in need of improvements, and the 44 Ranch homeowners have been trying to raise money for that. So it was actually in our early meetings with the developer stated as their preference that it be cash in lieu.
And then if there's a follow-up, we can try to answer. Otherwise, I can talk about the density.
I do have a follow-up, if that's okay, Heidi, with about cash in lieu. I guess I'll have to ask my questions of Parks, because I'm curious to know why that's defined as a regional park. My understanding, a regional park serves a much greater area and it's bigger in size and infrastructure. And do you know how much the cash would be for 1.43 acres?
Not at the moment, if I can answer that, Chairperson West. Not at the moment. It's something that's determined through a certified appraisal. So it's something when the developer comes in, okay, so you know this already, but no, I don't know what the value is. That hasn't been established yet. That would have to be dedicated prior to final plat filing, probably of each individual phase.
Okay. Thanks.
Can I add one thing? I'm not sure if it's a regional park. I think it's a neighborhood park.
Yeah, that's why I was surprised to hear that our city Parks and Rec department thinks it's a regional park, because it doesn't, from me being there, I wouldn't consider that a regional park. It's more.
And a neighborhood park will serve residents within a half mile walking on a sidewalk. And so certainly Remington Flats, that neighborhood park would serve them. And, you can check in with Neil Miner, but I know he was definitely in favor of cash in lieu. The amount too, the appraisal has to be done within 6 months of filing the final plat, and that's when they would pay the cash in lieu with each phase. So as each phase gets filed, another appraisal will be done, and that it's based on the unsubdivided, unimproved land is what the appraised value is based on, but it certainly is based on the new zoning. So,
yeah, thank you.
And then I would like to get back to Amber's question, since I cut her off. So the documents pulled up, we'll get to the density too, but about the half street.
Okay, so as you can see on your screen, this shows a proposed road section or a cross section of Chuck Wagon Drive along the property. Again, there's an existing 40-foot right-of-way along the western property boundary. What usually happens is half the right-of-way is taken from the subject property, and then half would be taken from the adjoining property. Right now, that's airport land. So they haven't chosen to dedicate that at this point. But so what often happens is the developer builds, they call it half-street improvements. And so you can see on this graphic, you've got the total across the top would be, on the east side or the right side, there's 40 feet of right-of-way along the property, potential future 40 feet of right-of-way to the left or to the west of that. The developer here is proposing to develop two 10-foot driving lanes, curb and gutter, and moving to the east or the right now, a 10-foot boulevard, 5-foot sidewalk, and then there's 6 inches of additional kind of wiggle room for access and maintenance and that sort of thing. Off the west side or the left side of the roadways, it could be completed right now. There's a small shoulder, 2.5-foot shoulder that would provide some stability to the road. And then hopefully, you know, the idea is to build it so that it can function right now for vehicular traffic, both north and south, but then at some point in the future could be built to full collector standards, which would include essentially mirrored improvements.
Can you scroll down on your image a little bit? I don't think we can see the full description of the driving lanes.
Well, I think you are looking at it. Now, this is a different, there are three different diagrams on this. So A is proposed road section for chuck wagon on site, and then B is chuck wagon off site. So that's the area to the south that the developer would build. It does have an 80-foot right of way. But it's essentially the developer is proposing to build two 11-foot drive lanes with 2-foot shoulders and then ditches for right now. And other developers in the 44 Ranch in particular would be responsible for completing that. You know, so this would be kind of a piece or a portion of the full road improvements, and others would contribute as well, and it would be developed out over time.
Thank you.
May I have a follow-up?
Yes.
Heidi, I just want to make sure. So, so to the basically to the left, or what would be west, that is airport land. So in order to make that a collector street, we would have to, they would have to say we can build it basically. Like what would happen? I'm just thinking about in the future is we hopefully the Mullen area master plan comes to fruition and starts being built out. I'm just wondering what it would require to make that a collector street from the airport. Just an easement, or like how does that work?
Well, you know, it depends on what the airport, there are a couple of different ways to do it. I mean, if the airport ever wants to develop what they would view as compatible development in this area, and they certainly could, you know, they could develop commercial or industrial type uses, maybe warehousing or, you know, some sort of support facilities for the airport. Then the airport authority would build that road out, would dedicate 40 feet to the city, 40 feet additional right of way. And they've talked about that a little bit. You know, we did have, they requested a meeting when this development was initially proposed, when they received a letter as adjacent landowners. And Dill Bickles, myself, engineering folks, sat down and talked with the airport a little bit. You know, they don't have, or at least my impression from that meeting was they didn't have specific plans for the future, but that's a potential, I think. And I think that's shown in some of their airport plan drawings or depictions. So that's a possibility. Another possibility is for the city to negotiate and essentially purchase the 40 feet of right of way from the airport authority. I think that wouldn't be as preferential from the city's perspective. They'd rather have, you know, someone else develop the road than the city. So, but that's an option, and you know, maybe eminent domain is an option as well. I don't know that that's something that I have no idea how council would view something like that, but I know it's an option under the law. I'll just put it like that.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
All right, I'd like to get an answer to Myrta's density question, and then we'll go to Brian.
So 152 lots on 20 acres is a density of 7.6 dwelling units per acre.
Thank you.
Am I up?
Yeah, sorry, I'm also dealing with a drone crisis. We lost a propeller.
No worries. I was just going to put the recommended motion to set the public hearing on the floor, so that you've got a motion on the floor and public comment. That's it.
Perfect. Thank you, Brian. I guess let's go. I'll ask Julie to ask any questions that she has, and then we'll go to public comment.
Okay, I apologize. I had to step out for a minute. This meeting was scheduled to stop at 9:45, and I had to go get a child on his school for the day. So I did hear some of the questions that Mirta raised about the cash in lieu in the parkland, and I deeply share those concerns. I would like parks to be here and give us their rationale for why this development gets to build in this block style with no park, no open space provided. And the last several developments that we've seen in this area have been required to offer parkland and open space. I don't understand the reasoning at all. And I wish that they were here to provide us with that information.
I think maybe we can ask Neil to come to the public meeting, or should I follow up in between now and then? What do you have a preference?
The conditions of approval are not actually on the zoning request. So I guess the public hearing that we're setting is about annexation and zoning, right?
Yeah, I think we'll see this project a few more times. Mary, could you talk to the process a little bit?
Yes, so today is a resolution of intent to annex, and that puts it in the city's jurisdictional ability to make decisions on this. You will have another LUP on the rezone and subdivision, and that is coming up on 9/30, September 30th. So today, in order for City Council to take further actions, you need to pass the resolution of intent to annex. And then there'll be, it goes to Planning Board on September 15th. There's an LUP on the rezone and subdivision on 9/30, and a City Council public hearing. The first public hearing's on the annexation. That's the first decision. And that is annexation and zoning upon annexation. And then the second decision will be on the rezone that's being requested to apply a neighborhood character overlay. And the third is on the subdivision itself. And typically with annexations in the resolution of intent, we include the conditions of approval that will be for subdivision, but those will change based on your decision as it moves forward. So this is a first step for you to be able to consider all the other information. So I think Neil will definitely be here at the LUP on 9/30 and at the public hearing. And if you have specific questions that you want Neil to address, he could, you could send them to Dave, and Dave could send them to Neil so that he's prepared to address those questions at the LUP on the 30th.
Thank you. Dave, did you have anything to add? I realized I lowered your hand.
Nothing to add.
Okay, perfect. So let's go to public comment. Are there any public comments on this motion? Mary, I am unmuting you. You should be able to, wait, unmute. You should be able to speak now. Hi, Mary.
Is it Mary McCrae? I had
Mary Maynard.
Okay, I'm gonna.
Mary, we can't hear you. Let's see. All right, I'm not sure. I can't hear Mary for public comment. Maybe if you could email us or call the voicemail, which is 406-552-6012, because we do want to get your comment on the record. I guess with that, we'll go to a vote.
Stacy Anderson is absent. Mirta Becerra?
Yes.
Shoot, somebody just called in. Should I try and get their comment?
I think that you should.
Okay. Hi. Are you here to comment on the annexation? 406. Last three digits are 514. You're unmuted.
I think they have to unmute themselves, don't they, Heidi?
They look like. Oh, and they're gone. So Mary has her hand up again. We'll try again. Mary, can you mute yourself and try and comment? Technology's failing me.
Yeah, Heidi, I'm not sure that it's on your end. Mary Maynard, you need to unmute yourself and then you should be able to make public comment.
Ryan, don't we need to unmute them first and then they also unmute themselves, or someone that runs?
Julie's correct. She's already been unmuted.
Okay.
Is permitted to talk. She's muted on her end, unfortunately. And I think the recommendation is correct. If this can't get worked, oh, there you go. Looks like she's unmuted.
Yeah. Mary, you want to go ahead? All right, so sorry. I think we'll go ahead and just go back to, hopefully, if you could submit your comment in writing to us or call our voicemail, or also come back for the public hearing on this item so that we can get your public comment, because we do want to know what it is. So let's go ahead and move forward with the vote, and then hopefully we can touch base after this meeting to get this comment into the record.
I'm just going to start over on the vote. So Stacy Anderson is absent. Mirta Becerra?
Yes.
John Contos is absent. Heather Harp, absent. Jordan Hess, absent. Gwen Jones?
Yes.
Julie Merritt?
Yes.
Jesse Ramos is absent. Amber Sherrill?
Yes.
Sandra Vaseca?
Yes.
Brian Von Lossberg?
Yes.
Heidi West?
Yes.
That's unanimous.
All right. And with that, I don't believe we have anything else on our agenda. Let me double check, and I guess we'll be adjourned. Thanks for bearing with me, and sorry to cut off people early.